of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, roll call. Trustee House.
Here.
Trustee Duchesne.
Here.
Trustee Levy.
Here.
Trustee Gould.
Here.
Trustee Wiseman. Here. Thank you. All right, let's see. All right, we have announcement, recording of the meeting. The district digitally records the audio portion of the meetings. The recorder is located in front of the board scribe. All recordings are kept in the superintendent's office for 30 days and are available during the time period for inspection by members of the public on district equipment without charge. As a community service, Pacifica Community Television records and broadcasts meetings. Okay. So, the board met in closed session to discuss public employee discipline, dismissal, release complaint, and public employee performance evaluation. Superintendent, no action was taken. We need an approval for the minutes of June 18th.
Move approval.
Second.
I have one change, small change, sorry guys. On page 5, under adoption of the budget, the third paragraph down, retiree benefit fund is Fund 71, not Fund 17. Okay. Just, Fund 17's our, so that's the only change I had. Is that fine? Okay, all right. All in favor? Passes by vote, sorry. That's okay. It's been a while, we're out of practice. All right. We need approval for the agenda and the consent agenda.
I move we approve the agenda and consent agenda.
I'll second.
Okay, all in favor? Passes by vote, thank you. Okay, communications. This portion of the agenda is available to the public to address the board on any issue that is not on the agenda. Maximum time allowed for each speaker is 3 minutes. LSEA? CSEA? People wishing to address the board? Correspondence?
I do have correspondence. We received a thank you card from Pacifica School Volunteer. Thanks to the Pacifica School District, Think Bridge is made possible. With gratitude, Kathy for PSD Think Bridge. And is Kathy the new?
She's the new executive director. Yes.
So they had it. I think every year they keep adding more and more students.
Yes, in fact, it was so popular, we had a waiting list and actually had to hire a teacher this year. So that was great. It's been a really good asset for the community as well as stabilizing the funding for Pacifica School Volunteers. So that's been great. Okay, next item is Board Superintendent Communications. Richard, you're in the hot seat.
Okay, well, and I actually missed a meeting in there somewhere. So since my last meeting, I got to sit in on the interview for new facilities director, working with me shortly. I went to the IBL graduation. I went to the open house for the Pacifica School Volunteers Think Bridge. So that was wonderful to get to see what all the kids were working on and all the computer stuff that they were doing. It's just incredible how many people they had running around and all the stuff that they were showing off. And then the other night I went to the Community Mental Health Services Forum, which was great because they had someone there from the County Office of Ed presenting on safe and secure schools, which is training that's coming around to all the schools. And then I also talked with the director of the Daily City Youth Health Services, which primarily provides services to high schoolers, but they are now interested in perhaps looking at moving it down a little and starting to service kids making the transition from 8th into high school. So they would then look to us for some way to reach out to those families, maybe through the principals at each individual school or whatever. So hopefully we can find out more about that and have them come and present to us at some point.
Very good organization.
Yes.
Well, so I was here at the last meeting, so it was summertime, so there's actually Very little. The only thing of note, just as a side note, is Tom Ball, who is the Pacifica, manager of the Pacifica Libraries, accepted a promotion and is now moved to Millbrae and is managing the Millbrae Library. And Julie Finklang is the new manager of the Pacifica Libraries. She had been the manager of the E-Branch, so she's very, very tech savvy. And she no longer lives in Pacifica, but she's a former Pacifican who actually got her start as a library page aide at Sanchez and discovered she liked libraries, did a career change, went to library school and all that kind of stuff, and is now back. So we have a new manager, so that will, she'll connect with the district and the county and all of that as we move forward. And I've been to countless meetings, but you don't want to hear about any of them, I'm sure.
I have nothing in particular to report, although I did notice as I was passing the Sanchez Adobe that they have the sign up for their Rancho Days in late September. I think it's the 20th. And I just remember, like, when I was there, they were saying that they they wish that was a bigger event. So I thought maybe I would start talking about it now. Hope that maybe somebody would. Maybe people would put it on their calendars, because that's a really fantastic place.
Is that the adult event or the one for kids?
I mean, I think it's for both. Like
It's a family one.
What are their hours? I mean,
what are the hours of the Rancho Days? I just saw the sign up with the date, so I will get more information and make sure that you have the full info in plenty of time.
Yeah, that'd be great, because the one for kids is great to promote because it fits right in with our curriculum for 4th, 5th grade.
it's on a Saturday.
It's a week before the Frog Fest.
I've been on vacation, so I haven't done anything. I haven't looked at it, I've run past by schools and waved, but that's about it.
Did they wave back?
No.
Well, most of my stuff has been with PSD, helping Kathy, the new executive director, kind of get settled, and she started kind of in the middle of she started at the end of the school year, which is kind of crazy. And then I think of note is that there will be a school board election, that there are 4 people who have filed, Richard, and Kathy Shikari, and Laverne Villalobos, and Elizabeth Burdett. And tomorrow's the deadline, but it'll get extended because I won't throw out.
Friday.
Oh, Friday. Not sweet. Okay, yes, right, Friday. So, Wendy?
Okay, first I want to say thank you to both Ray and Josie. They held down the fort during most of the month of July as I went on vacation. So it was a great time for me to be away, and I appreciate their willingness to step in and step up. The school obviously continued to go, and Nelson and the team have been working very hard at getting our wireless upgrade, working with Bear Data Solutions, and working all of our sites in the district office. So the goal hopefully is by August 15th to have us up and running with the glitches out, and then we'll have our teachers back, so they'll really start to fire up, and we'll see how things go. But it's really kind of an interesting process that they go through, and you can see, where you have some problem connections and then go back in. We also had Comcast have to come out and do some look at some of their wires as well, connectivity as well, so that's been helpful. We are going to be working on mental health, focusing on mental health this year. So one of the administrators' training is to be trained in what they call mental health first aid, to kind of be able to look at students and see if there are some signs that we might be missing or seeing. So we will be getting trained by a trainer from San Mateo County Office of Ed. So that'll be exciting. It's a 2-day training, so we'll do one right now, and then they'll come back and do the other. We are preparing for the opening of school, and that means that the total cleaning of the schools in classroom and outside facilities And tonight you'll be able to meet Mr. DiCarlo, who has been gratefully and thankfully leading the team. He started, I believe, July 8th, and hasn't stopped running. So I appreciate that, and the schools are looking good, and I think it's going to be an exciting year. Teachers have been attending the professional development for SVMI. We now have only 15 teachers who need to be trained in September that need the training, because some of our teachers who are RSP teachers, et cetera, don't necessarily need to go, but we have 15 classroom teachers who will be pulled out to do the training in September. September, I believe, is the date. So we're real excited about that. They just finished today, I believe. So other than that,
And just one more thing, since it will be prior to our next board meeting, is the 23rd, for anyone who either are out in our audience or anyone here who knows new families to the district, is the Welcome to Pacifica School District event being held at Valmar School.
at 10 o'clock.
At 10 o'clock.
Yeah, thank you very much. Oh, here.
No, I had it in my calendar as 10 o'clock, but I was walking down the hall and there's a flyer that says 11 o'clock. It says 11 to 1. It's posted.
Is that from Pep?
Yeah,
It's on your wall back there.
right in front of his office.
We'll have to look, 'cause
I'll
I
have
was
to
told
check.
10 to 11.
I'm doing childcare, and they told me 10 to 2.
Okay, I was surprised because it was different.
Okay.
Okay, well, I will confirm, thank you, if the information's out there incorrectly, that's going to cause just a little problem. Okay, so we're ready to presentations to meet our new Director of Facilities Maintenance and Operations.
Okay, so we started our search this past spring for the new Director of Maintenance, Operations, and Facilities, and the process did consist of engaging all of our stakeholders within our district community, and it also involved a multi-leveled interview process. So with that being said, we did find a great person, and it is my pleasure to introduce to you Mr. Joseph DiCarlo.
Thank you.
And Joe's going to share a few words with our board.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak tonight. First of all, I want to offer a long congratulations. I interviewed several places and was offered jobs, including this one. This was by far the most professional and friendly organization I dealt with. I was very impressed. That afternoon, I called my wife and I go, "This might be the place." Some of you had an opportunity to meet her. She's equally impressed. Okay? I've worked a lot of places, okay? Some big places, some small places, and it's given me a perspective on organizations. And even though some of them were private, public sector, commercial, successful organizations and unsuccessful organizations are very much alike. Okay, a successful organization is where you have a culture of cooperation and support, and the unsuccessful organizations are ones where you have people running around adhering to their personal agendas. Okay, with a lack of support. Okay, in my short time here, I feel that the correct message is out there. We're all working towards a common goal. I've seen across departmental lines nothing but cooperation and support. I'm very impressed. I'm very happy. I think I have an opportunity to make some contributions to the organization. I think I'm very much looking forward to spending a great deal of time here, and I thank you all for the opportunity.
Well, welcome, we're so
Thank
glad
you.
you're here.
Me too. So that works well. Okay.
We're already hearing good things.
Well, that's good. Well, I expect to hear the bad things too.
No, don't worry.
Yeah, well, okay. Thank you very much. Okay. Any
I just want to comment, I was able to come to the meet and greet, Joe, whatever, for the first days he came, and the room was full. We invited all of the maintenance staff to come, and guys came who were on their days off and on vacation because they wanted to meet him. and I was very impressed that day with how you spoke and from your heart and the breadth of your experience. And I think I looked around the room and it really saw it connecting to people, and I think we're really glad to have you and appreciate your service, and to Ray for finding you and for the rest of the staff for bringing you in. I think it'll be great.
Well, the basics of the whole job is people, okay? Anybody who's done this job for 20 years has the necessary skills. Okay, just by stumbling through mistakes, you learn to do things right, okay? But it boils down to dealing with people, customers, parents, students, and if you can't do that, you better find yourself another line of work. So.
True enough.
Anything else I can answer for you folks?
No, thank you for coming, and...
Thank you very much, I appreciate it. Hope to see you all soon.
Thanks, Joe.
Thank you. Okay, we're on to district business. First item is unrepresented employees' compensation for LSMA, so that's the Laguna Salada Management Association.
So the district appreciates its relationship with Laguna Salada Management Association, and annually we do negotiate what's called total compensation, and total compensation does include medical benefits, retiree benefits, salary, etc. And so this year we did negotiate again with LSMA a 1.5 increase, and this increase is due to a health benefits cap. And that affects our management staff only. And so it's recommended that the board approve this annual negotiated agreement between the district and LSA.
Okay, so we're approving a 1.5 salary increase and the step and column increases.
Correct.
Questions? Comments? Okay, all in favor? I'm sorry.
You need a motion and stuff.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm out of practice too. Can we have a motion, please?
I'll move approval, but I do have a comment.
Okay.
Move approval.
Second, but you made a comment before.
Okay.
No, we can discuss.
Oh, sorry.
Either.
I'm out of practice on
No,
this.
no. I don't have any problem with the action. I have a small problem with doing it in August, in front of an empty room. I just think that this is the kind of stuff that should be done during the year when our other union groups are here and there's more public, because I don't want it to appear like we're sliding something into the middle of summer when nobody's paying attention. And even though that's not the case, it can give the appearance of that. So I just prefer in the future that we try and do this during the year.
And I agree with you, Eric, and I apologize that it's coming in August. In the future, we will always put it on our June agenda.
Thank you.
And you contacted the labor
All of
partners
our
to
labor
inform them
partners.
that it was
Yes.
on, so.
Yeah, well, it's not a huge surprise because me too, so it's just a matter of going through the process as well. It's not
Totally understand what you're saying.
Okay, so all in favor?
Ask five.
Okay, our next discussion action item is the change to the San Mateo County Special Education Local Plan Area.
Yep. So this too is also an annual recommendation for the board regarding SELPA. And with our special education local plan area, SELPA, there are changes that are made to the plan annually. And so it is recommended that the board adopt resolution 20140806-A for the most recent SELPA change.
Any questions?
May I add too that this change was in relationship to Stanford New School being removed as part of the SELPA.
And this is just because there's that rule that anytime they change anything in SELPA, every single district in SELPA has to approve it, right? Okay. If nobody else has any, do you need a motion?
Yes, I need a motion.
Okay, so I move that we approve resolution 2014-08-06A.
Second.
All in favor? Passes 5-0. Thank you. The next item is our endorsing Attendance Awareness Month. This is an action item.
So this endorsement started last year, and it has now become an annual item that we will see as a school district, Attendance Awareness Month. And for Pacifica School District, last year, we did start off with supporting our school sites and our district leaders with the attendance toolkits that will help them pay a little bit more attention to the importance of attendance and what activities can keep kids in school and prevent chronic absenteeism. What I wanted to bring to the board's attention this year is that we have put a little bit more focus on chronic absenteeism, and we do have a district-wide rate of 7.55% of our students are chronically absent. Chronically absent is defined as being out 18 days or more during the school year, roughly 10%. So we will be bringing this data to the attention of our site leaders so that we can decrease chronic absenteeism in the future. This also is in connection to our most current LCAP, Local Control Accountability Plan, Goal 7, and we do have written in there an action to decrease chronic absenteeism in general. Just for a little note to the board, the first grade level that we will be focusing on that had the most students chronically absent is at the 8th grade level in our district. 8th grade. District-wide.
Yeah.
Could you give some context to that number? I mean, is that, it seems shockingly high to me. Is it, or is it going up or down? Do we have any history?
I don't have a trend analysis for the board, but I'd be happy to gather that information and share it with you. I also am very interested in seeing what does 7.55% mean statewide throughout all the districts. So are we low, in the middle, are we high? I would suspect that we're not high because we do have a good attendance rate, a very strong attendance rate in our district, but I will gather that information.
Well, it would also be interesting to know if it's by, if there's school issues relative, schools.
That does include when someone's sick, right, like a chronic illness. So
Correct.
that includes when you have a student who has a chronic illness. We had a few of those. So
Yeah, we did.
Which keeps our students out for a long term.
Legitimately.
No, right, that's good, thank you, because that's good to separate out, because that's not a, I mean, it's a problem, but it's a different problem.
Right, it's a health issue as
Right.
opposed to not attending.
A truancy or something.
Yeah. But I appreciate you paying attention to that, because at one point, Jim Leanis did, he looked at the 9th graders who were unsuccessful at Terra Nova, and Jim went back and pretty much hand-pulled the data, and about 80% of those kids had chronic absenteeism starting at 2nd grade.
Second grade?
2nd grade.
Wow.
That, they were kind of in this 10% gone since 2nd grade. And, so it has a huge impact.
So September is Attendance Awareness Month. We will be putting a focus on it, launching off the new school year for 14-15, and it is recommended that the board adopt the resolution 2014-08-06-B.
Move approval.
Second?
All in favor? Okay, now we're at the nomination for Outstanding Legislator Award, Outstanding Freshman Legislator Award, and Special Recognition Award. This is a discussion. Is it an action item? We don't have anybody?
No.
It's just a discussion.
It's a discussion to determine if you want to nominate anyone, and then if we do, we'll need to bring a resolution to the next board meeting to make it for the due date in September. So this is this is replacing the CSBA Outstanding Legislator of the Year program, for lack of a recognition program, and it will include all those areas that Joan discussed, and The due date is September 12th, so we would need to determine whether you want to move a nominee forward. And the nominee must be from your district, so it must be a person who is affiliated with Pacifica School District, within our area, just so that, Comments, thoughts,
Did you have a question, Eric?
I was just processing
what that might mean?
you mean, so our senator or our assembly member?
Right. There's also the Dee Dee Alpert Award for Exemplary Education Leadership and the Albert S. Rada Lifetime Achievement Award. And I attached what those nominees' achievements should be.
Anybody have any ideas, suggestions?
When school funding in California hits the national average, I'll nominate somebody.
I'll second that.
Okay, so it looks like we won't bring back a nomination for the next meeting. Okay. The next item is trustee school assignments. This is a discussion action item.
So we discussed when we went to CSBA conference, one of the things that one of the school districts had done was assign a trustee to a school, and that way the trustee was someone responsible to do that real in-depth get to know the school community for that particular year, and then we would rotate every year. And because sometimes you only get to know just the surface of a school, and this way, perhaps when we do our reading of the site plans, you would take more in-depth ownership of that. Or when we have discussions about data, you would look at it from a different perspective in relationship to a particular school that you are assigned. Those would be the schools that you would attend their open house, that type of thing. And if parents would like to reach out, sometimes it's hard. Who do we talk to? We could put on the website your school area of focus, so people could then contact you and try to and get a sense of what that community is dealing with and needing to do. So as we build our LCAP, we have another method of getting feedback. So it's a suggestion and a thought.
In some ways, it makes me leery because there are different people in our community that might feel different approaching one of us over the other. So if you were, I think that if we were to do something like that, they still need to realize that they can reach out to any of us. It doesn't necessarily have to be a person that is, assigned to that school.
I think that's very, sorry.
I know for myself, I like attending things at all of the different schools. So, if we choose to go this way, I'll sign up for a school, but I'll probably still be popping in to all the other schools as well.
I think, so this was, this was a session that I attended, and I think that the potential benefits were a couple. One was that the idea was that, number one, you would have the opportunity to meet more of the people, and personally, it would be useful to me because I always feel stretched very thin, that I can't go to as many of the things as I wish I could, and so I feel like this would give me the ability to sort of concentrate more, and then over time, I would get to do that at multiple schools. And then also not just to go to the events, but also to go to attend a PTO meeting or a staff meeting and get to know people more in that way. And then again, over time, board members get to know the district a lot more deeply than they do if they, when we go to graduations, that's nice, but we're really sort of there to wave the flag. We go and we say we're here, and that's great, but we don't really participate much in that. So I think it would be really useful in that way. But as you say, like, I mean, obviously, we all represent the entire community. And then, since we would only be doing it for a year, that would change, right? So, so you would have, so presumably if they met you last year and, now it was, Eric's turn to be at that school, but they felt like contacting you because they had, they felt comfortable doing that. I don't see that there would be any problem with doing that. We could even take away the whole, like, this is your contact person thing, if you feel like that would make it feel, if you feel like that would make it feel like we were representing a school, which we're not, because I understand that issue. So we could kind of take that piece away from it, maybe.
So I've seen it work, the district that I work in, that's the way they do it. And the board members have, a school or two assigned to them, depending on, because there's more schools and board members. And what it allows the school community to do is they actually know a board member. Because that board member's been in classrooms, they've been, they've been there visiting, they go to a lot of the events there that learn, more about the community there. Whereas when you have board members just kind of popping in here, popping in there, well, maybe that board member will know that school well and nothing about this, and it gets to be kind of hit and miss. And that's the way I feel I am right now. It's like, okay, there's something going on at Boulevard. I'll try to go to Belmar for an event. No, that conflicts with one over at Cabrillo. Maybe I'll try Cabrillo. And I think that there are, because we kind of pop around, we have some schools that don't, that don't have a relationship with a board member, and I think that that would be a good thing for us, so that we can speak as knowing a school really well, and a good thing for the school as having a connection to the board. So I kind of like this idea, and I kind of like the idea of not having to look around and see what I should go to this month, this week, to just look at one school or two and say, okay, principals, what looks good for this month, invite me to some things, tell me what you'd like for me to come and do, or, really connect me with the school.
Eric?
I agree. I think it's intriguing, and the numbers kind of work out. There could be one per K, 5 or 8 school, and then maybe 2 for the middle school. My only caveat is the reality that both Joan and I will be off the board in 4 months. And there are going to be at least two new board members, and they may feel differently, or they're going to be new and having to learn the whole district. So that's just my only caveat as to, do you want to do it now, or do you want to consider this after the election and see what their thoughts are and how that would work, having new board members? I mean, I think this board is comfortable going to any school and doing it right now, and if you choose to do that, I'll certainly take my school for the next 4 months. But the reality is that Joan and I are both going to be done in December, so how that factors in.
Or we could make January the switchover time, so we could do it for the fall and just have, and in general, we could say, well, we'll switch in every January, and just this once, everybody will have just a semester instead of a whole year.
No, that's fine. I just wondered if you have 2 new members and they're trying to learn the whole district, is that good or bad to have them at one site? I don't know. I mean,
I think a new board member might not really know whether that's good or bad anyway, so it's like, okay, this is the culture of the board, just follow with the culture.
Well, and you two actually are probably the best sense of that. I mean, you're the 2 newest in that respect. I mean, would you prefer that to what happened, or?
Yeah.
Okay.
So you would have preferred just coming on and saying, okay, you have this school, just worry about that for now, and you'll gradually get introduced to the rest of them as you go.
Yeah, because at other things that we do, we meet all the principals, we kind of, we do a band thing, you see all of the students, but just to be able to focus in one place, I think would have made it a little bit easier for me, because I still felt like there's, I don't know, I've been to IBL a few times, I don't know anything about IBL, it'd be nice at some point in my tenure if IBL was someplace that I spent some time. I think it's important, yeah. just have somebody connected to all the schools.
And I think it is important to get to know the schools in depth. And where I've been able to have deeper conversations with the principals, it's been helpful and enlightening to hear directly from them too, what their issues and specific concerns were. And so, the nice thing about January is it sort of fits with all our committee assignments
Yeah.
too. And so you almost get 2 schools in the same year, for a little bit.
Yeah.
So.
It's got to fit with the election cycle and everything. It
Yeah.
seems going to make sense to do the change in January.
Because the new people may want to be at a school that their kids haven't been to,
Right.
right? Just in terms of, because all of the candidates running are current or past parents. So, they do already have some breadth of understanding of the district.
It might also be helpful for the principals in the sense that, like, I feel like it must be very difficult for them with 5 board members sort of like randomly dropping in. They don't really want to say anything to any of them because they don't really know how much truck they're going to have with any individual person. So it might encourage a little bit more of a deeper relationship between the board and the principals as well.
And I like the idea of not putting the assignments up there because some people are very touchy about board. There's some perception sometimes that board members represent a particular school, or, well, you didn't take care of me. What do you mean, me?
Well, and some people actually think that's how it works. Like, there are some people who think that, like, each school elects a board member, and that's how it's constituted. So I have had the opportunity to explain to people that it actually doesn't work that way.
So I think if we just leave it as our, kind of in that committee assignment thing, but we just don't even post what it is, other than when we post the committee assignments.
So do we want to assign? We also have Lindemar Education Center, so we do have 2, 4, 6, 7 sites to consider. So I don't know how you want to pair or not, or, you might have a better sense, I'm not sure how.
So it might make sense to put a couple of schools together for a single board member and LMEC, you should go to the board member that can do more daytime stuff because that's, but that probably needs to shift into, so I think it would benefit all of us to know LMEC, but
Yes,
go
absolutely.
through that, so, what we can do.
LMCC/homeschool.
Yeah.
Don't forget.
Well, LMEC includes OT, PT, our preschools. We do have Life Steps there, one of our agencies for 0 to 5, 0 to 3?
0 to 5.
5. So, I mean, it has some very complex programs there.
In terms of the school pairing, I would suggest that we put a K-5 with IBL, because there's some uniqueness about transitions and things like that in terms of, the Ks, the kids theoretically, or most of the kids, most of the parents are there for the whole 9 years. And so going from the K-5 to, especially the 2 K-5s merging into a new community, there's transition things, like, for example, when we scheduled the Ortega back-to-school night on the same thing as the IBL back-to-school night, and parents were like, those kind of little issues that nobody thought about, but had a great impact. So that would be my only suggestion on the pairing.
So, if I understand what you're saying, is each of us would take, set IBL aside for a second, but of the 5 other schools, each of us would take one, and the person who took Ortega would take IBL, and the person who took Sunset Ridge would take IBL. So IBL would have 2.
Good, or
we
just
could do that.
just have at least one of the K-5s paired with but with IBL either way.
That's kind of a nice idea, because we have, so I sort of feel like the board president should get a pass on having to do 2, The board president should get 1 school because they're already, like, doing a lot of extra work. And then, so of the 4 remaining, so 2 people would get the K-5s and IBL, and then there would be and then LMEC would be, so one other person would wind up with LMEC on top of whatever they got, and then one other person would have just one, maybe like, the newest person would only get 1 or something, and then the next 3 would get you know,
You know
I don't know,
what we-
something like that.
And a pairing might be like Ocean Shore and LMEC, because Ocean Shore is the smallest school. And then you have, you know, kind of make one
Yeah.
big school.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so who wants what?
Well, I think we should we should randomize it. I don't,
Okay,
you know, rather.
just draw
Pick it from,
names out.
that's what they said at this one, they
That would be
said just pick it from a hat.
I'm free during the daytime, so I can do LMEC, but I already know Ocean Shore fairly well.
Yeah. So why don't I just do a random, but we want the president to get either Valmar or Cabrillo, because that's a
Oh, so they
single.
don't double up, yeah.
Okay, and then I'll just let you know what the assignments are. Okay. Sandy and I have.
Hang on a sec.
Oh.
Hang on.
So, but we're going to reassign in January.
Right. I don't think it's a huge deal, but I'm not sure randomized, because if you've got kids in a school, that could be good or bad. You might,
Oh, yeah, well, we shouldn't, I mean, obviously, you shouldn't get,
Right,
if you have
the
kids
idea
at a
is to
school, you
get to
shouldn't
know
get
the
that
schools
school.
better than-
right, you shouldn't be, if your kids are going to Valamar, you shouldn't have
Okay, well,
Valamar.
that affects us too, so.
Right, so I guess it's
Well,
not
that
quite,
affects you and Tuesday.
I'm just saying.
For one more year.
That makes you very challenging.
Yeah. Okay, so we'll keep that in mind.
You can figure it out.
Boy, said
It'll be
we.
random-ish.
Boy, they're just really challenging us now. Okay, got it.
All right.
They're going to assign, they're not going to randomize,
Yeah,
they just won't tell
I'm
me.
just gonna
Yeah,
pick.
it'd be real random.
Okay, so next
Wait,
thing
no.
is, oh, sorry.
Question, do we have to do an action on that, since
No.
setting up all the board assignments is an action, isn't it? When we
I don't
originally
think it's
decided
a-
that.
no.
That's because it's a commit, right, that's because committees have to
committees.
be assigned, but this isn't,
I don't think
since
that.
this isn't a
Is
committee.
that an action when we change the?
Because when
The
we changed the,
committee is-
when we
committee
changed the
assignments is
committees,
an action
it had to be action.
But these aren't committees?
Yeah, I don't think it.
Well, maybe that's a question when you're talking with one of our legal counsels, just slip that in.
Yeah.
and Ask, and we can take action at the next meeting if we have to. We won't know what our assignments are till then.
Right.
Well, that was my question too.
We don't take action when you choose which graduation ceremony you're going to, or,
Right.
you know, things like that.
Right, but I think it was an action when we added or deleted committees from the list of things that we took.
I think the committees are, if I remember correctly, the committees are an issue because if the committee requires Brown Act notification, then it has to be an action
Okay, so
item.
is that the caveat?
But so I think that's why the committee assignments wind up on there, but I could be wrong about that because I'm too
It
new,
is-
so. I
Yeah,
don't
it
know.
is a mixed list.
And it is also, we're empowering that representative to represent us at those committees.
Right.
This is just go and visit and socialize and,
Okay.
but anyway, you can check that. and
We'll check that.
If we need to take an action item, we'll do that. Eric?
My just question is timing, when we're going to do this and see this, so it's in place before the start of school.
Well, our next board meeting is August 27th.
And we have back-to-school nights on the 4th and the 11th of September.
So is the 27th soon enough? Or I could probably,
I'm just saying, it'd be nice to have this roll, if we're going to do it in fall, we should roll it out at the beginning of school so that we can go to our assigned schools,
For back-to-school nights,
You know,
as is all possible.
if possible.
you'll have it for back to school, right?
Yeah, but the sooner we can schedule that,
Right, because some of us can't make every back to
So I
school.
can send an email out what the assignments are by Friday?
okay. And then if we do have conflicts, we can adjust, because that's going to happen. You know it's going to happen. Anyway, all right, response to grand jury report, this is a discussion and an action item.
So, June 10th or so, yeah, June 10th, we received a grand jury report, Educational Frenemies, Can Charter Schools Inspire Better Student Outcomes in Public Schools in San Mateo County? And within this document, they had some recommendations that the school district and the board would approve the responses to their recommendations and findings. So I've attached for you the report and a draft of the response.
Any questions?
Just for the record, I would like to state my amusement at the fact that the grand jury report begins with the assumption that charter schools are not sharing their fabulous findings, and the result of it is that non-charter schools have to do something. So, like, I was amused by that, but I thought that the response was fantastic.
Yes, well, on my note, I find that it's that giving more flexibility and freedom to charter schools promotes better education, and yet when we're not a charter school, we are not afforded those same bits of flexibility. That's my pet peeve. But the response is great.
That's why we let somebody responsible respond.
Our responses might not have been so professional. Any other comments, suggestions? Okay, this is an action item, so all in favor of...
I move
I'm sorry.
approval of the
I am trying to get a record here. You are.
Move approval?
Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Passes 5-0. Thank you.
Okay. So Josie, we're ready for our quarterly report on Williams uniform complaints.
Okay, as part of the Williams settlement, districts are required to report quarterly any complaints received, and I'm happy to report that we have no complaints in the final quarter ending June 30th in the areas of textbooks and instructional materials, teacher vacancy or misassignment, or the condition of our facilities.
And for the record, we have not, since we've had to report.
Yes, that's correct.
Do we have any idea what the state level kinds of complaints are?
I haven't seen that. I should look into that,
It
though.
would be interesting to know how many people are complaining, because we do, as a state, we do this. And, you know, if we're generating paper and nobody's complaining, I don't know.
Well, it's
It was a
I
lawsuit.
know, it's a lawsuit, I know, I understand where it's coming from,
Okay.
but, you know, it's having that kind of data to bring out so that people understand what the implications of whatever actions are taken. Okay, so now we're to the really fun part. Board bylaws, policies, and administrative regulations. Are you guys ready? All right.
Yeah,
Hoorah.
just go slowly.
Okay, BP 3260, fees and charges.
Okay, I have a few things. Wendy so loves it when I have a few things.
That's why we get paid the big bucks.
That's right. Okay, so I am on page 1
Of the BP or the AR?
of the BP.
We're only to the BP.
Okay, just checking.
No student shall be required to pay a fee, deposit, or other charge for his/her participation in an educational activity which constitutes an integral fundamental part of the district's educational program, including curricular and extracurricular activities. So this is kind of a broad statement, which is good, I guess, for a policy. But you know, my question was, would it be appropriate in this part of the policy to put in some examples of things that you would not be required to pay a fee for? There are examples in the AR of things that you can put in a fee for. But my comment is that I feel like we still have a problem with asking people to pay for field trips, not being very good about telling people that they don't have to pay the $10, otherwise their kid, the assumption is when that teacher sends home that thing and says you owe $10 for the field trip, that you have to pay that. And, I wonder if maybe in our policy, we could talk about, just, a few words about that field trips might be one of the things that you're not required to pay for. There are some other things too that I think that we don't make very clear to our community that we are supposed to provide, but I'll get to those down in another paragraph or two.
School supplies.
Exactly. But it's been a concern of mine for a few years when I talk to other parents about field trips, they have no idea that if they can't pay for that field trip, that their kid can't be penalized for that. And, we've worked on it a little bit, but we work on it at the district level, but I don't know that it always gets to the teacher level, because I still get notification that my kid owes $50 for that field trip, and it usually come up from a parent, because they're the ombud for the field trips, and so those people are saying, you owe. Well, what if they're saying somebody, to this, like, they can say it to me and I can go to wherever, it's a public school, I know that I can say that, but I don't know that a lot of our parents know that.
So, and correct me if I'm wrong, Josie, field trips we can charge a fee for field trip.
Yeah, and I did, thank you for sending these comments ahead, Andrew, because I did get a chance to look at the AR. And at first, we thought the AR was just for out-of-state, but it does say on page 1, expenses of student participation in a field trip or excursion to another state. And it says, as long as no student is prohibited from making the field trip due to lack of funds. So it's on the AR, but I understand.
I think there's a problem with that there is not a comma there. I think since there is not a comma there, so can we move to the AR? But I looked at something from Azana Smith about interpreting this, and their interpretation of it is that you can't charge for field trips. You can charge for transportation costs of field trips, but you can't charge for field trips. And, I poured through that today. But if we look at the AR, you guys help me read this. So,
So the point then, so we're not making any changes to the BP at this point? We want to do AR and then come back?
can you look at the AR and tell me about what you think this says? At the AR, page 1, number 3, expenses of students' participation in a field trip or excursion to another state, District of Columbia, or a foreign country, it's okay to charge for. I think since there's no comma in there between field trip and excursion, it means a field trip or excursion to another state. I think number 3 is all about going out of state.
This is the Washington DC trips.
Right.
Can we look
I don't
at
think it's
code?
talking about local.
Can we look up the ed code and see if that, is that, because sometimes CSBA just kind of like copies and pastes the ed code, but sometimes they rewrite the ed code a little bit for BPs, and so maybe the related ed code is clearer about what it says.
Does anybody see why you could interpret this sentence in 2 different ways? Or am I crazy?
Well, like
Yeah,
both
no,
here.
you're right.
Okay.
Can I piggyback on that? Because, I mean, the wordsmithing is one thing, but isn't it the bigger issue sort of what is our default setting? Is the default setting the expectation that everybody pays, or is it that you don't have to? I mean, what's the message in terms of that's gone out is the standard, the expectation? Because what I'm hearing you say is the expectation, regardless of what the AR or BP is, the expectation is everybody has to pay. And that's become the norm, even though it's not true. And maybe that's what we need to figure out, what's our standard and how do we deal with that, and the wordsmithing can come after that.
Matt?
That seems like a reasonable point. I think that I have heard just in the past year, this probably to Monica's credit, that for instance at one sort of major field trip, where they called all the parents, it's the first overnight field trip, so they called all the parents in to talk about it. And at that meeting, they did specifically talk about, if you can't, here's what we're asking for. If you can't afford that, go talk to Monica. Don't tell the teacher about it, but like talk to Monica about it, and we'll work it out. So I thought that was good. I was less happy with the school supply situation, which I know we're supposed to say we are asking you to donate these school supplies, and that at the school level, that was, I think there was something that I saw the word donation, but then a lot of the teachers sent out supply lists that did not include the word donation, and so maybe it didn't, maybe it takes some time for that to filter down, that needs to be, that needs to be clear. And I could understand how the teachers really wouldn't want it that way, because anything that the parents don't supply is essentially going to come out of, is probably going to come out of their budget. So I could see that issue as well. But I do sort of see, I feel like maybe this is something we just have to have kind of like a more in-depth discussion about. Maybe this issue alone needs to be kind of split off, and we have a discussion just on that, because I feel like we've kind of been discussing around it, and some changes have happened, and they've been sort of like halfway, and part of it is about what the law says, but I think the law is kind of not clear, and then Lozano Smith interprets it, their way. Who knows if, then who knows, maybe somebody will sue and that will change it. So I feel like maybe that this is something that there's some minimum requirements here, like of what you can and can't pay for, and it's possible that maybe we might want to determine otherwise. I mean, I know that notice that it says here, when approved by the governing board, you can impose a fee for these things, and that's different from the BP. So in the BP, it says no student may be required to pay a fee. It doesn't mean you can't ask for one. It just says that we can't require them to pay one. So I understand that. But for this, it essentially seems to say you can require it for these things, and that's why I tend towards Andrea's much narrower if it's out of, so if they go to Washington, D.C., you could require them to pay for that, but if they go to, Point Bonita, we could not require that. Even if the governing board approved it, we could not require them to pay for that. Did that make sense?
I think having a time to really devote some time to it would be good, just so that we can hash through all of these kinds of issues and really have some thought, and then staff can also have time to do a little more research. Does that sound? So we will bring this back not as a board policy. We'll start with it as, we'll start with this as a basis, but it'll be a separate agenda item, so that we can really have the time to think about it and focus.
So, but within this is also the supplies and the notifications that, so there's more to this than that, that one little section.
Right. It's not just, it's how are we implementing what our policies and our ARs are, and what's the tone of that process.
When that comes back, and it doesn't have to be immediately, one question that I would have is sort of what on average people wind up paying out of pocket for a school year. I mean, I would be kind of, haven't totaled it for myself, but.
That varies from school to school depending on how much.
Field trips.
Yeah, no, that's a good point, but I would.
If you go to Ocean Shore where they're going on field trips monthly, it's going to be different.
Mm-hmm. That's true. Well, we could get a random sampling. I don't, you're right, we couldn't get a firm answer on that, but if we knew what the magnitude was, if we were like, well, at the minimum, I'm assuming Sunset Ridge is at the lowest end of that, because they're obviously the most sensitive to their student population. So we could get that as a low end, and then, we could get maybe Ocean Shore as a high end, since they have the most field trips. Maybe, just to give us an idea of this is what people are asking, parents to pay for, and then we could, I think that would help me decide, obviously 0 is ideal, but there's a lot of, if we're saying, if there are schools where they're asking for $2,000 to $3,000 a year or something, that would give me a heart attack. I don't think that's the case, but I would sort of want to know.
Well, it depends if you're doing big overnight Washington DC trips.
Yeah, that's true.
Or, Catalina trips or some other big ones.
Catalina is a school trip. The Washington DC trip, that's done, isn't that voluntary and done not during school time?
Well, and that's what we need clarification on, too.
Some schools do and some schools don't. It depends upon their size. For example, Cabrillo, I believe, goes to Catalina.
Right.
this year, IBL is looking to do that during the spring break. So those who
Oh, I
want
see.
to
So that
go,
would be just-
so it's not
Right,
during
so
school
I
time.
equate Cabrillo's Catalina to Ocean Shores Yosemite.
Right.
But there's
Yeah,
a,
'cause they're done during
there's
the
a difference
school.
there when you're taking kids out of school in terms of being an integral part and
And that's an integral part when you miss
With school.
when you
Right.
take
Yeah.
it from school.
Yeah, if you just say like, well, we have this opportunity during spring break,
Right, that's-
that doesn't count. I think that's, yeah, so.
although, yeah,
If it's during the 181 days, then it's an integral part of their school year. They're supposed to be learning during that time.
yes.
Right.
Eric?
And I think that the budget, the numbers of what parents are spending would be an interesting addition to the budget. You know, we added, last year, Josie added what the PTOs were spending into the real cost of running the schools. Well, this is a real cost of running the schools that we really haven't been tracking in any way, shape, or form. It might be interesting to sort of see what numbers pop up there and just
It's
as,
going to be a very difficult number to chase down.
Well, I mean,
We'll see.
You
I
could-
tried for years on the Ocean Shore PTO
Oh, really?
to track down how much are we actually spending on programs.
Well, it's because, and part of that's because so many people donate, so sometimes you don't, it's not just that you write a check, but that you bring the, the hamburger for the camp out, or whatever. So it's, there's that in-kind donations that people don't even think about, they just do, which is a cost.
Yeah,
Fees,
that's true.
whatever. Okay, so we will bring this back as a separate.
Okay, and then just
So-
one point of clarification. We printed the ed code and it is including in-state, so it probably does need a comma. Just that AR does include in-state and out-of-state.
Okay, all right, so we will, something for us to talk about tomorrow. All right, so we are moving on, we're gonna skip AR 3260 since we've sort of done that. BP 3280, sale of lease of district-owned real property. Eric, I think you were gonna share with us?
there's no AR that goes with this, is there?
Let's get on our beginner.
I mean, I don't have an AR, just the BP.
Well, while you're doing that, while you sharing what.
I raised an issue, and I've spoken to the superintendent, and I've spoken to Wendy and to Josie about it, and this seems to be the appropriate place to raise the issue of what is, we don't seem to have a policy in place of how frequently we revisit our fees for leasing. We have, I've noticed, and Josie and I have spoken that, we do roughly the $1 per square foot, but that also isn't consistent throughout, and over the years, through the bad budget times, there've been reductions put in place, perfectly understandable. But it seems to me, I would like to see us have a policy that our leasing fees, that we had a policy on fees, and that we revisited it every couple of years at least, so that we weren't still charging people the same thing we were charging 12 years ago. So I would like to see some sort of, I don't know if that would go in the board policy, or how.
Depends. We'll have to look if there is an AR that goes with.
I'm trying to.
There is on the gamut.
But I've lost my internet connection.
3280.
But in any case, that's a piece that I would like to, I'd like to see addressed in this. So, we have a policy that would perhaps include, conceivably, a different rate for nonprofit to profit, or however we do it, but I think it's an omission to not have a policy and to just do it on a catch-as-catch-can basis.
So I guess my wonder is, with this current BP in front of us, is that acceptable? And we may want to, though, have maybe a couple of board members work with Josie or me or whomever, and maybe facilities, put a little committee together to kind of look at what we do have in place or don't have in place, and then we can bring it back to the board for discussion. Does that make sense? But so I'm wondering if these are two, we can move forward on this and then.
I don't feel strongly one way or the other, because there's a second part to what I'd like to see discussed in that. And there's been, over the years, occasional interest from, we lease space to the school volunteers, we lease space to the Spindrift in lieu of their providing support, doing programs in the school. We've had requests, I've had discussions with other community groups who would be interested in leasing space or having space at some of our sites. Some of them are just community groups, others do some things in our schools. So I'd like to suggest that that be explored as well. What's the implications of having, if we have vacant space that we could use as a community for a place where our community groups could meet. I see lots of unintended consequences and potential problems, so it's certainly more of a brainstorm than a full-blown, I don't have a proposal at this point, but it seems to me part and parcel of this whole discussion. What do we currently charge? How do we do that? What might we do for other groups? What kind of space do we have available? And what would be the implication of offering that to different groups that are community groups that need space? And if we have the space, how might that work?
Would we be required, if we did that for somebody, would we be required to do it for everybody? How we have those, I can't remember when we had this discussion, but we had a discussion about some community group where we were like, well, if we allow them to say, advertise in the school groups, then we have to let everybody do it. So if if like the California Nazis want community space, then we gave it to everybody else, so we have to give it to them too. So
right, and that was exactly the issue. Is I think there are a lot of potential unintended consequences that we should look at, but I think it's worth looking at in this context and kind of figuring out what it might, if it's possible, and if it's too much, then.
And so again, I go back to the particular board policy. If understanding that we want to go deeper into conversation and develop perhaps some policies, procedures that we could again bring back to the board and for discussion, etc. Are there recommendations or changes, or do we need to pull this board policy while we're doing that, or should we go with the recommendation of staff to use this as is, but yet we will take this next step and have a small committee and start looking at leases, etc.
As I look at, there is an AR here, and that is a little more specific. It's about the advisory committee, who's on the advisory committee. That was probably mostly the sale, and there's sale, lease, or rental. So I think it would be more appropriate to get it into the AR with the specifics, because it talks about childcare providers, it talks about it talks about some specific groups in there. So I think
Whatever's the pleasure of the board, I don't have a strong, I would think that something would wind up in the board policy, in that we do periodic reviews of fees on rental property. I would think that would be a policy. That's all it would say, and then the AR would specify, but I would think at least some of this would wind up in the BP.
So then we should pull this as well until future.
is that what you guys would like to do?
Take a look at it.
It's up to the rest of you. I kind of, my feeling is, since we don't know if the end result of the discussion would be to change the BP, it seemed, to me, it sort of makes sense to let the BP go through and then discuss it, unless you feel like it wouldn't get discussed unless we pulled it, in which case I'm willing to do that. So I will cheerfully defer to everybody else's opinion on that one.
I'm fine with letting it go through the way it is, if we could maybe bring up the AR somehow.
And we can go back and look at this too, and if we need to put policy in, we can bring that back too.
Yeah, you can always bring it back.
Yeah, okay.
Then the second question would be, or next question would be, who would like to be representatives? Maybe two, Joan and Eric, is that okay? Thank you.
Okay, so this we'll bring back on consent, and then we'll form a committee here with... Okay, right, sorry. Bigger desk here. All right, now we're on to AR 3460, financial reports and accountability. Did we? Do you have a policy on that? I mean, I didn't see, I don't have my paper copy.
What's the question?
So AR, I just don't have it, can't put my hands on my paper
No, there's
copy.
just mayor on this
Yeah,
one,
there's
just
just
like there was
mayor.
only a BP on the previous one.
There's a BP on the sale and lease.
Right, but there's no AR.
This is the financial reports and accountability.
Yeah, the reason that they're just bringing the AR is because the new law requires the annual audit to determine whether the funds are expended in accordance with the LCAP. So we had previously reviewed the BP and AR when the LCFF came along, but now they're saying the auditors need to include a review in their annual report, which wasn't an audit requirement this year.
Yeah, sorry. So does anybody have any issues or concerns? Okay, all right. The next one is Board Policy 3513.3, tobacco-free schools. Good, okay. Agreement, we want tobacco-free schools. Okay, then we have E 4112.9, 4212.9, and 4312.9, employee notifications.
Just a potential request for when these things happen in the future, like, is it possible to like redline what actually changed? Because this causes my head to explode when I attempt to read all of the notice. Because, you know, I mean, I'm like, well, I'm assuming that we've already, because I feel like we see these notices regularly because this gets changed all the time. Every time somebody passes a law, you have to notify somebody of something, and that particular E-reg changes. I think we've already approved this like twice since I've been on the board.
Yeah.
So maybe if it's possible to just sort of go like, this is what we added, or
Yeah, I
whatever.
agree with you on that one. It would be a lot easier if we made changes.
That can be done.
Okay.
The other question, and I apologize for
Sorry, I
not,
didn't want to add another box.
No, that's all right.
but it seemed like they were all the same. I couldn't figure out what was different between each of the three ones.
Well, it says that the new law requires the uniform complaint procedures to include information on the LCAP requirements. And then there's a new law on the notification of teachers when they're in a Title I program, and something about bus driver's licensing and vehicle idling limitations. Those were the changes.
Okay, thank you. Vehicle.
Yeah, I saw all that in here.
But are these three things all identical, or are they all different?
It says new law, so
Yeah.
it should, when it says new law, that's something that they've added.
To which
No,
one
but
of
you're saying
these?
like there's 4112.9, 4212.9, and 4312.9, and
And I
they're all
couldn't
employee
figure,
notifications.
they all
and
looked
what's that?
exactly the same to me. I couldn't figure out why we were having three lists.
Because they reflect each employee group.
Yeah,
Classified, certificated, management.
Okay. You know what might be helpful is if we could add that to the title. So, because it just says personnel, it says to all employees.
Well, that's one. Number 2 says to certificated employees, and number 3 says to classified employees. So that's why, because it's, 1 is for everybody, and then the 2 and 3 are for different group.
Where does it say that though? I'm looking at it and it says to all employees.
No, but if you scroll down
Now, see,
and look at number 2,
See, I think that it's
It
not
says-
clear that that's for 212.9.
and then 3 is
starts there,
classified,
right?
4 is administrative supervisorial personnel.
Right. Right, I see that, but isn't that the same on all of them?
No. They could make it more complicated, but they'd have to try.
I don't know, they're doing a pretty good job. All right, so we'll bring those back on consent. AR 4117.14, 4317.4, post-retiree employment. Okay, AR 4117.7, employment status reports. BP 5131.62 tobacco. Board policy 5144 discipline.
There should be some.
Board policy 5144.1, which is suspension, expulsion, due process.
I'd like to discuss a suggestion that was brought forth by Matt. With this BP, if you look at page 2 and go down to the last paragraph, we'd like to possibly consider adding the statement, let me see, where it talks about bullying by means of an electronic act is including an act that originates off campus. So in the AR that's attached to this BP, there is language talking about cyberbullying. So the suggestion to the board is that we include in items 1 through 4, item 5, that would address cyberbullying off campus.
Okay. And what would that mean, actually? That it's that the cyberbullying that happens off campus is under our purview?
Well, it is. I mean, I think, so I think what it is in the AR, it makes it clear that cyberbullying is something that we can regulate and punish. But here in the BP, it says, except when otherwise permitted by law, you can only do it while on school grounds, going to or from school, and it doesn't include cyberbullying here. So if you just read the BP and not the AR, you might get the impression that cyberbullying was not something we could punish. So I just thought that it would be a good idea to just explicitly mention it here so that somebody didn't get the wrong idea and we didn't, I could see somebody going like, oh, well, see, you can't punish my child because I read your BP and it says that only while it's on school grounds and this happened. And then we could go, well, the AR, but, so.
So it's to match it up. And so where the beginning of these items says, regardless of when it occurs, including but not limited to the following, we would add a number 5 that says bullying by means of an electronic act as including an act that originates off campus. So,
You might also run it by legal to look for the correct ed code, because the ed code that it may be specifying 1 through 4 relates to the ed code that they've written. So if you add a 5th, it may be under a different ed code. So just ask legal.
I will. I'll run it by legal, but that ed code is cited in AR as well.
Okay.
But I'll definitely run it by legal.
I mean, in my understanding with the cyberbullying is that it has to have an impact in the schools, which it's gonna, because that's the nature of bullying. But yeah, if legal can just take a look at it and make sure that it's specified correctly.
It's getting to a point where social media is so difficult now that I think with the charges and the lawsuits that I see going through the court, they're really starting to say this has got to stop. I mean, it does, where the nexus is between what happens at home and what happens at school is important. But clearly, when you have that type of behavior occurring at home, it filters into the school because kids just have such a difficult time.
Okay, so do you want that back on consent? Do you want to bring it back?
It can come back on consent.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So that was the board policy AR 5144.14, suspension, expulsion, due process. And E 5145.6, parental notifications. Okay. Future agenda items. So we've got the lease rental to come back at some point. Fees.
So we would put BP and those two BP and ARs, and then fees. BP. And then for future agenda items on suspension and expulsion update, we will be including that in our presentation of, on August 27th, on Goal 7, School Climate and Safety. We will be including that information in there, so I will remove that item from our list.
Thank you, I really appreciate that.
Yeah, we're getting to it. And then, let's see if there was anything else I needed to add. And then we'll do the school assignments, and then that way we'll decide for back-to-school night, right? So we can-
So the kind of the assumption is that whatever school or schools you're assigned, those will be your back-to-school nights unless there's a conflict, and we can resolve that at the August 27th meeting?
Sound good? But it doesn't preclude one for going to the, to any of the schools, right, or whatever.
Well, they're all happening on 2 days.
I know, and I really appreciate,
both of them.
Oh, all right.
I really appreciate the flexibility because the schools really wanted to get the information to the parents right away and to not have it on a Wednesday and blah, blah, blah. It just, there weren't enough days.
It's tough, there's all kinds of activities going on.
Yeah.
So, anything else? Great, meeting adjourned at 8:22.